Greetings. The Bible passage appointed for the third Sunday in what some Christian traditions call ordinary time comes from the 10th chapter of the Gospel of Matthew, verses 24 through 39. The passage begins with these words: Jesus said to the 12 disciples, "A disciple is not above the teacher. It is enough for the disciple to be like the teacher." The words bring to mind that there are many men and women who teach us how to go about living life. Sometimes they don't even know that that's what they've done. We call these men and women our heroes and our sheroes. Sharing their stories with each other blesses us all with a multitude of valuable life lessons. In the following conversation via Zoom, my friends Ron Morton and Musu Hoffman share such stories and life lessons across cultures.
My name is Ron Morton. In Indian country, they call me Otter, O-T-T-E-R. I'm a Cherokee, Choctaw, and Creek, but I've spent a tremendous amount of time with tribes all over the country and also in Canada. So I identify as an Indigenous person in Canada. That would be First Nations, and here in the U.S. it would be the tribes of the U.S. I'm also a veteran and deacon, St. Luke's.
Thank you. Well done. Musu?
I grew up in Liberia, West Africa. I was born and raised there. My father was an African American. He passed away 4 years ago. So I have that cultural aspect of my life also. And but what shaped me and inspired me and made me the person I am, I would say very much my formative years in Liberia.
Okay. Not all Indian people know anything about being Indian. And there was kind of a diaspora in this country of Indian people who lived in various areas of the country on reservations or on trust land. And in the 1960s, everybody was moved out of those areas to various urban centers throughout the country. So I was an urban center, not necessarily because of that. I was in an urban center because my family were poor folks from Oklahoma and they migrated to California during the Dust Bowl. My hero is a guy by the name of Ron Crispin. Ron Crispin was from the Santa Isabel Reservation outside of San Diego. He was also a holy man, medicine man, spiritual leader in the community. And a friend of mine, his name was Nicio Aguilera, and I put together a traditional health gathering. And that was when I really met Ron, because Ron came and we all built sweat lodges so that we could use them during the traditional health gathering. That was my beginning connection with Ron. Shortly after that, his son died in an accident, and I became better acquainted with Ron as a result of that, and better acquainted with the customs as a result of that. But one thing that was really clear to me was that just because I wanted to be an Indian didn't mean I was an Indian. It was a kind of cultural change that I wasn't necessarily uncomfortable with, but that I didn't really understand, because so much of my history as an Indian in my family had been lost. And so I started hanging out with Ron. I started going to the sweat lodge out at his property. And he lived outside of San Diego on the Viejas Reservation. That's where his wife, Virginia, was from. But one day I was at an APA conference in Washington, D.C., and one of my friends there invited me to go to Sundance. And I had heard about Sundance. Sundance is a major ceremony in Indian country. So I went back to I got back into town and I went back out to the sweat. And I told my friend Ron, I said, hey, I've been invited to go to a Sundance up in South Dakota. And he just shook his head because he knew I didn't know anything about it. And it was it was sad, but it was poignant. But I was humble. And I said, I don't know what I'm going to be doing up there. I need help. So he and a friend of mine, Manny Musu, took me in hand and told me what I had to do to get ready for the Sundance. And that was really, I think that was really the beginning of my journey to becoming an Indian.
Introduction.
Yes, go ahead.
My shero is my grandmother, Rachel Johnson Massaquoi. From her, I learned how to be a strong woman and live in a society with diversity and be inclusive. Grandmother grew up somewhat privileged. She was part of the Americo-Liberian group. Her grandfather was president of Liberia, and she was married to Africa's first diplomat, who was formerly the Prince of the Vice from the Gallinas territory, which lies in both Sierra Leone and Liberia. Why did I choose my grandmother? She grew up in a life of privilege. She got training and schooling, education in England as a businesswoman. But when she married the diplomat, she didn't have any real use for her schooling. But after he died, and her father, who was a landowner, also died, their estates were in escrow, and she had no money to support she and her 3 children. So my grandmother did step out of her comfort zone. She became a market woman. She made bread and pies, baked goods, and sold them. She had to get up early in the morning and go to the seaside to get fish from the fishermen and fry fish and sell that. So that's how she started off. She was able to buy property of her own. And one of the most important property to us, she has some other ones around town that are money makers, but the most important one for us is the farm in the middle of Liberia, because there my grandmother practiced farming skills which she learned as she went along. She grew an orchard. She had hogs, chickens, and it was just fabulous to spend every summer with my grandmother. And I ended up being sort of like her youngest daughter because I followed her everywhere she went. Not because I really wanted to follow my grandmother, but but it was because I was very nervous and almost afraid of everything I saw. So so she'll be like, "Come on, Musu, let's go. You need to stay close to me." So because I stayed close to my grandmother, I learned how she operated, how she dealt with people, and some of her philosophies in life, primarily her faith in God. My grandmother was very steadfast in her faith in God.
As the conversation continued, I asked Musu and Ron to comment on the risks their hero or shero had to take.
I think Ron took a risk with me in the same way that he would have any stranger who was approaching. And the reason why is that Indian people have learned over the years that when someone comes and asks for help, it's a good idea for them to keep their hand on their billfold, because people who go to help in Indian country always want something. For me, I just wanted to be Indian, so that wasn't a hard need to satisfy. But I think that a lot of people go to Indian country and they want power, or they want spirituality, or they want to be Indian, or they want this, or they want that. So Indian people learn not to trust, learn not to trust folks who show up without an introduction. There's still places I won't go on a reservation, even though I know a lot of people on that reservation. You have to be careful and not overstepping your bounds. But Ron took me under his wing and he straightened my head out, and he taught me what it meant to really be an Indian.
What risks did my grandmother take in becoming somewhat a leader, yet not prominent, in a leader in the community, her community, but yet not a prominent figure? The first risk she took was having to marry my grandfather, who was not in the circle. He was he was a native indigenous Liberian, and it was an arranged marriage between the two of them. So that was the first thing she had to get accustomed to his way of doing things. So from that experience, one of the things she taught me was that you are not above anybody. You are part of your community. You have your word, and your word is very important. I like her inner resolve and strength, because once she had to marry my grandfather, she was no longer considered part of the in crowd of the Americo-Liberians. She was almost like an outsider. But she didn't let that interfere with what she needed to do for herself and her children. So she taught me the importance of working hard, and the importance of treating everybody with respect and never being dishonest about what you had to do for people and for yourself. She was not a pushover, of course. So there comes her strength. And then I have to sneak in my grandfather's mother, her husband's mother, that I only heard about. She was a warrior queen. So from both my grandmother and my great grandmother, I think I inherited that strong personality of a female, and I'm not afraid to take on many things that are thrown my way.
Heroes and Sheroes, people who teach us strength in the face of adversity and trust in the face of risk. Thanks be to God for the heroes and sheroes sent by the Spirit to illumine our way, and blessings for the days to come.